I'm Charlotte, and for as long as I can remember, my worth was measured in family dinners, not by my achievements. My life was a performance, and my parents were my harshest critics. They never asked me to be a lawyer or a doctor. They just asked me to be Serafina, my perfect younger sister. I learned to accept my place in the family as the perpetual disappointment. But the day I got married, everything changed. My parents didn't come to my wedding. They said it was an embarrassment. What they didn't know was that their absence was the greatest gift they could have given me. It was the moment I finally understood that I was free. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Charlotte, and my life has always been a performance. I grew up in a house that felt more like a meticulously curated museum than a home. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, every perfectly manicured shrub in the garden was an object of value, a testament to the success of the Vance family. My father, Arthur, was a titan in the tech world, a man who saw intellectual property as the ultimate form of currency. My mother, Evelyn, was his living masterpiece, a socialite who orchestrated charity galas and dinner parties with the precision of a military general. In this world of polished perfection, my older sister, Serafina, was the golden child. She was naturally graceful, effortlessly charming, and seemed to intuitively understand the unspoken rules of high society. My parents adored her. They saw her as a reflection of their own success, a legacy of good breeding and impeccable taste. They'd constantly praise her, not just for her achievements, but for her very existence. Serafina was always the one being celebrated. My own life, in contrast, was a series of polite dismissals, my academic achievements, my love for literature, my quiet fascination with complex financial models all were met with a blank stare or a subtle change of subject. They never asked me to be a lawyer or a doctor. They just asked me to be more like Serafina, without ever explicitly saying it. I once came home with a ribbon for a state-level math competition, and my father simply nodded and said, "Good. Charlotte, it's always good to have a backup plan." It was a quiet way of telling me that my passion was, at best, a hobby, and at worst, a distraction from what truly mattered, a life of social and financial influence. I learned to accept my place in the family as the perpetual disappointment. This dynamic was put on full display at one of my mother's lavish charity galas. The ballroom was a sea of glittering gowns and tailored suits, a symphony of polite chatter and clinking champagne flutes. My mother, radiant in a ruby red dress, pulled me aside to introduce me to one of my father's most important business partners, a man who held the key to our company's next big merger. "This is Charlotte, my eldest," she said with a strained smile, her voice a little too loud to be genuinely warm. "She just does some financial number crunching. Very important, I'm sure." She then turned to Serafina, whose arm was linked with her fiancé's, and her voice softened to a melodic purr. "And this is Serafina. She's set to marry into a wonderful family. There are partners in the firm that's handling the merger." It was a masterful, public dismissal. I felt my face flush, and I wanted to disappear into the crowd, a monument to my own insignificance. My escape from this suffocating world came from the most unexpected place, a broken air conditioner. It was the middle of July, the kind of sweltering Boston heat that makes the air feel heavy and thick. I had just moved into a small condo downtown, a place I had bought with my own money, a tiny rebellion against the family estate, when my unit sputtered and died. The front desk sent up a technician. That's how I met Lucas. He arrived with a toolbox, a faded t-shirt, and a few oil stains on his face. At first, I didn't think much of it. I just wanted my space to be cool again. But as he worked, I was impressed by his calm and intelligence. He didn't just fix the machine, he also explained its operating principles, knowledge that I, a financial analyst, had never thought I would hear. We started talking, and I realized Lucas wasn't just an air conditioner repairman. He had an engineering degree from MIT, and this job was part of his long-term plan to build his own company, starting from the most basic things. Those conversations quickly turned into informal dates. We explored old bookstores in Beacon Hill, debated classic works, and walked in Boston's public parks. With Lucas, I didn't have to be the Vance family's daughter. I was just Charlotte, a woman who loved books and numbers. He wasn't impressed by my money or my status. He only cared about my true self. He helped me reevaluate myself, accept my flaws, and cherish the values I had long tried to hide. Our love grew quietly but deeply, like roots firmly gripping the soil. I spent 6 months keeping this relationship a secret from my family. I knew they would never accept someone like Lucas, a person without the lineage or status they deemed appropriate. I lived in a world of deception, pretending to be busy on Saturday nights when I was actually with Lucas, enjoying a simple but cozy home-cooked dinner. Lucas asked me about this, and I told him I needed time to prepare my family. Finally, I decided it was time to face the truth. I wanted my parents to meet the man who had changed my life. I hoped that if they saw our love, they would understand. I invited my parents to dinner at a luxurious restaurant. I asked Lucas to dress up, and he did. But even when he wore an expensive suit, I still felt my parents' judgmental gaze. That evening was a complete disaster. My mother talked about her acquaintances, what their children were doing, and what connections they had. My father only talked to Lucas about blue-collar jobs, as if he were speaking to a low-level employee. I tried to interject, to talk about Lucas's ambitions and intelligence, but my words seemed to vanish into thin air. They simply didn't listen. When Lucas got up to go to the restroom, my mother looked directly at me and said, "Charlotte, you can do better." Her voice wasn't harsh, but full of disappointment. "We have too much to lose." Bringing him home to meet my parents was, in hindsight, a mistake. I had hoped they would see what I saw: his intelligence, his kindness, his unwavering integrity. Instead, they saw a man in work boots, a symbol of everything they had worked so hard to escape. The silence in the room was deafening. My mother kept her face a blank mask, her eyes occasionally flicking from Lucas's calloused hands to his plain polo shirt. My father, with a glass of scotch in his hand, simply stared out the window, occasionally clearing his throat. They didn't have to say a word. Their silence said it all. After Lucas left, the polite facade finally cracked. My mother called me, her voice trembling with barely contained frustration. "Charlotte, you could do so much better. What am I supposed to tell my friends? The son of the senator wants to go on a date with you, and you're bringing home a man who fixes things." The way she said the last 3 words, "a man who fixes things," was laced with pure condescension. It wasn't just a critique of Lucas. It was a critique of my entire existence, a final verdict that I had failed to live up to their expectations. The next day, my father called me into his study. The room was lined with leather-bound books and mahogany furniture, the scent of old money and power hanging heavy in the air. He didn't beat around the bush. "I've arranged a dinner for you with Julian Thorne, the son of a major investor. He's looking to expand his portfolio in fintech, and you two have a lot in common. End this distraction with that boy. We will not have you embarrass us." His words hit me like a physical blow. It was a cold, calculated transaction. He wasn't giving me a choice. He was giving me an order. A final attempt to reclaim control over the last part of my life that was truly my own. But that didn't stop us. On the contrary, it made me realize that if I wanted to be true to myself, I had to let go of their control. My love for Lucas was not an impulsive decision, but a mature choice. That's why, after returning from that tense dinner, I looked Lucas straight in the eye and said, "I want to marry you." It was the first decision in my life that didn't require anyone else's permission. That was the moment the conflict peaked, and my real life began. Despite the pressure, Lucas and I moved forward with our plans. We decided against a lavish affair, and chose a small, intimate ceremony at the Boston Public Garden. It was a place that felt more like us, simple, beautiful, and full of life. We sent out invitations, not to impress, but out of a final, foolish hope that our parents would, for once, prioritize our happiness over their reputation. The responses were predictable and always came with a polite but firm excuse. My mother was so terribly sorry, but they had a crucial fundraising gala to attend. My father was swamped with a new acquisition. The truth was, they were too busy orchestrating Serafina's grand, over-the-top wedding at a prestigious hotel, a spectacle of wealth that was plastered all over the Boston social pages. Every day I saw a new photo on social media, a pre-wedding brunch, a designer dress fitting, a lavish shower. It was a constant reminder of the difference between my sister's life, which they deemed worthy of public celebration, and my own, which they considered a private shame. A week before the wedding, my father's call came. His voice, usually calm and measured, was strained. Shaw and me will not be there. Charlotte, we do not wish to be seen at an event that is beneath our standing. This marriage is an embarrassment to the Vance family. We hope you understand. The finality of his words was like a door slamming shut. It was clear they had made their choice. They had chosen their reputation over their own daughter. I hung up the phone, a cold, empty feeling settling in my chest. The tears came unbidden, silent and hot, as I finally gave in to the sorrow of being so utterly abandoned. The day of my wedding, the sky was a perfect cloudless blue, but inside I felt a storm brewing. I sat in the bridal suite, staring at my simple, elegant dress hanging on the closet door. It wasn't the designer gown my mother would have picked out, but it was perfect for me. My cousin, the only family member who had come, sat beside me and squeezed my hand. "They don't deserve to be here, Charlotte," she said softly. Her words, though comforting, still hurt. But as I took a deep breath, I realized she was right. They didn't deserve to witness this. They didn't deserve to see the genuine happiness that was radiating from me. I walked down the aisle, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with a quiet resolve. My eyes met Lucas's, and the world outside of us faded away. Our ceremony was short and beautiful, filled with laughter and heartfelt promises. Our friends, a small, genuine group, clapped and cheered with real enthusiasm. It was a wedding that lacked a lot of things my family valued, but it had everything that truly mattered: love, respect, and authenticity. That evening, as Lucas and I packed our bags for a honeymoon in Italy, I made a decision that would change everything. I scrolled to the family group chat, a place that was usually reserved for Serafina's announcements and my mother's meticulously edited vacation photos. I found the perfect picture. It wasn't of us, but of a large banner hanging outside the venue. It was a congratulatory message from one of Lucas's corporate partners, a sign they had put up to surprise him. The sign read in bold, clear letters, "Congratulations, Lucas Hale, Chief Executive Officer of Tech Solutions, on your exclusive partnership with International Green Energy Corp." I took a screenshot and sent it to the group. The silence that followed was unnerving. For an hour, my phone was dead. Then, it exploded. The first call was from Serafina, her voice laced with panic. "Charlotte, what is this? Lucas is a CEO. Why didn't you tell us?" Then my mother called, her tone a mix of anger and shock. "Why did you keep this a secret? We could have helped you. Do you have any idea what this means for the family?" It was the first time in my life they had ever truly acknowledged me in a way that wasn't condescending or dismissive. Their frantic calls continued throughout the night, each one more desperate than the last. The next day, a small article in the Boston Business Journal came out, confirming the partnership. It also revealed Lucas's full story: a brilliant MIT engineering graduate who had spent years working on the front lines as a technician to understand the industry from the ground up, all while building his own groundbreaking company. The headline read, "Tech Solutions CEO Lucas Hale shakes up green energy market with stealth strategy." My parents were stunned. Their perception of Lucas as a common laborer had been shattered. replaced by the very thing they valued above all else: power and wealth. My mother called again, her voice now syrupy sweet. "Darling, we were just so worried about you. We'd love to take you and Lucas out for a celebratory dinner at the Four Seasons. We can talk about everything." I paused, considering her words. The offer wasn't an apology for their behavior, but a desperate attempt to rectify their miscalculation. It was a transparent move to get back into a good graces and a chance to gloat to their social circle about their son-in-law's success. I sent a simple text message back, a quiet echo of their own words just a week before. "We're on our honeymoon. I'll call you in a week." The silence that followed was beautiful. A week later, we met them for dinner. My father, typically so commanding, was awkward and hesitant. He tried to steer the conversation toward business, praising Lucas's intellect and vision. But I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. After he finished a long-winded pitch, I leaned forward and said, in a calm, steady voice, "You're not apologizing for the way you treated Lucas. You're just regretting that you misjudged his financial potential. You didn't miss my wedding. You just missed a business deal, didn't you?" My words hung in the air, a truth they couldn't deny. My father looked down at his hands, speechless for the first time in his life. My mother just stared at me, a flicker of something I couldn't identify, maybe respect, maybe shock in her eyes. They left the restaurant shortly after, without saying goodbye, their perfect mask of composure shattered. As I watched them walk away, I felt a sense of peace I had never experienced before. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. My worth was never determined by their acceptance or by social status. It was always there, waiting for me to recognize and claim it for myself. I didn't return to the family home, I didn't apologize, and I didn't have to explain anything ever again. My true family was sitting right across from me, and our story was just beginning.